Hello and welcome back to Suspended Fanimation. I'm your host, Dennis Batholkus, and tonight I'm doing Project Blue Book Season 1, Episode 3, The Lubbock Lights. Yeah, man, another good episode. Still carrying on. It's not the formula that I was saying it was in the last episode, which I'm kind of glad they're. Well, I don't know. I'm kind of disappointed, and I'm also kind of glad that they're not following a formula where, we start with the beginning thing that happens, the investigation, and then they're changing it up a little bit. So it's actually good. I'm liking this. I'm doing okay tonight, Filthy. How about you? All right. So before I get started here, and hey, Movie Fanobi, how's it going? Spoiler alert, I am going to spoil the episode. So if you haven't watched the episode yet, go and watch it. Come on back. And this will be in a video form. You can actually comment down below in the comments. So, with that said, we start off with Lubbock, Texas, and an air traffic controller named Tommy talking to his girlfriend about what movie he's gonna take her to see. The Thing, of course, which was kind of interesting. And he sees something on the radar, so he says, "Hang on a second," and he tries to, calling it up, saying, "Identify yourself, aircraft," and all the power in town goes out. And then we see this aircraft fly overhead, this flying V of lights. And I've got a story about the flying V of lights later on when we go through this one once I'm done here. And she's basically saying that she sees the lights too over the phone, and everyone's freaking out. And we cut to this guy talking. They're sitting smoking, and there's an audience that's in front of them, and they're talking about alien cover-ups. And this is Donald Kehoe is his name. He's written a book called True Stories, and he's saying that about flying saucer cover-ups and the military, of course. And we see the man in the hat sitting in the audience as well. And afterwards, this guy comes up to Kehoe and in his dressing room there and says he has something really interesting to show him that he doesn't think that Kehoe's ever seen before. And Kehoe says, like, well, you know what? You got to surprise me on this one because I've seen a lot of things. And so they go outside, and he shows him, these are some of the lights in Lubbock, Texas. And we see the man in the hat sitting outside in a car taking photos of Kehoe and this other guy as well. So we know that the man in the hat works for the government. We'll get to that in just a minute here, because I wasn't sure. We got a couple of things answered in this one, which was kind of interesting. Only on the third episode that we got a couple of answers going on here. So Hynek goes into his son's room, Joel, and can't find him in bed, and sees a light on inside his closet. So he opens it up, and Joel's asleep on the floor inside the closet, and wakes him up. And his wife comes in and goes, what's going on? And they wake him up, and they're like, what are you doing in here? And he says, I'm hiding from the spaceman from Mars. And he's got a copy of Kehoe's book and says everyone at school is reading it. And, so he's afraid. He's having nightmares, of course. And then the phone rings, and of course, and Quinn gets his call to head on out into the night, because that's what's been going on here. Excuse me. Excuse me again. God, my throat's a little bit on the outside there. Quinn and Hynek go and talk to this guy who is his fiance, this guy who's in bed. He's out cold, and he was found in a car wreck, supposedly, without a scratch on him now. And the fiance is like, yeah, what the hell's going on? His car was found on the side of the road, smashed to bits. He had no marks on him whatsoever. That's not an accident, really, is it? If he doesn't have any marks on him. And, he's been like this ever since. And the guy all of a sudden wakes up, grabs on the Hynek's hand, and we see this like electric charge kind of go between them. And Hynek looks very surprised, and we cut to a commercial, of course. We see Mimi at this point helping the neighbor, the next door neighbor, stock up a bomb shelter, which is basically a shed out in the backyard with some food in it. Because that's what they're selling at the hardware store instead of the really expensive below ground units. And they start talking about, well, it's only room enough for one family. And, who knows, if you have someone knock at the door, what would you do? And that's why my husband bought a rifle and said not to worry about it. Yeah. Everyone was overacting at this point in time, movie Finobi. It was, the Russians had just started testing their atomic bombs. And yeah, it was, and also we had the start of the Korean War. So there was a lot of tension going on, a lot of tension. And, that leads people to do some really drastic things. And yeah, so it was a very, very interesting time. So the sheriff takes Quinn and Hynek out to where this guy's car was and still is, and it's all twisted up. It looks basically like it was heat treated and all warped and everything. And they said they just found him behind the wheel of the car, just grabbing onto the wheel. That was it. And they took him out and wheeled him away to the hospital. So, and he, of course, didn't have a mark on him at this time. And then they asked the sheriff about the blackout, and he said it happened near the university. So they decided they're going to go over to the university and check that out. As they're making their way, the dean, I guess, of the university has given them a classroom for the witnesses that they can, question the witnesses at. And they're trying to make their way across campus when Quinn sees a pretty co-ed and a couple of co-eds, actually, and, of course, goes to hit on them and gets invited to a homecoming party. And it's like, we don't have time for this, really. We're late as it is. Yeah, that buckled metal and glass on the truck was pretty damn cool for Finobi. And Hynek was talking about how it had to actually hit the right electric frequency in order to get it to warp like that. So we end up having them go into the classroom, which is a huge classroom, and it's filled. Pretty much everyone in there are witnesses. Quinn doesn't believe it. He thinks that kids are just going in there to get out of class. And so he says, yeah, he goes, this is for people that are really witnesses. The rest of you skedaddle. And they all sit there and stare at him. And Quinn says, okay, who saw the lights? And pretty much everyone in the room raises their hand, actually. So they go through the whole process of questioning people, and everyone's saying the same thing. They saw these lights. They looked terrified. They kind of froze in place. And we see Hynek actually drawing a grid in between these interrogations or these questionings. And he makes a grid of the campus of where people saw things and where and when. And he says, okay, there's no way this is refracted light or shooting stars or an airplane because there's no flight scheduled at this time. And he goes, so I don't know what this was at this point in time. Yeah, that teacher was a kind of an asshole, Finobi. He was, and the thing is, nothing much has changed. I'm just going to say that. There are some like that to this day. So, excuse me, Professor Ruppelt walks in and says, I have this class next. He goes, you guys need to get out of here. And Quinn comes down and says, no. The dean says we can have this room as long as we want. And of course, Ruppelt says, the dean does not own this classroom. I do. Of course, and says, I've solved your problem anyway. Here's a picture of the lights, and I know what's going on. And he says that what it was a flock of plovers, which are quail-sized birds, that street lights were reflecting off of the oil from their feathers as they're flying overhead in a V-shaped formation. And I'm like, seriously, man? Really? And same thing. Hynek had that same look on his face, like, I don't think so. And at this point, Ruppelt is actually erasing the equations that Hynek had written on the board and everything else like that. I'm like, what an asshole. Yeah, Peter Quail-sized birds. There we go. There's a nice little crossover. In the meantime, Mimi goes into the hardware store to get a fallout shelter, and she notices, of course, the clerk's helping somebody else and says, I'll be with you in a moment. And she notices this sketchy guy in a hat, a regular hat, just comes in, and he kind of disappears in the back of the shop and then literally disappears. And then the clerk shows back up again and says, can I help you? She goes, yeah, I'm here about a bomb shelter. Do you have any bomb shelters still in stock? And he's like, oh, yeah, sure. He goes, why don't you send the hubby by tomorrow? And, I'll talk to him about all the specifics of it. It's kind of complicated. And she goes, well, hubby's out of town and I want to surprise him. So why don't you ring me up and then you can deliver out to me tomorrow where I'll set it up myself. Thanks a lot. And did I make that, clear enough for you, or less, least complicated for you? And he smiles and says yes, and goes and rings her up. I actually kind of like that Mimi stood up for herself at this point in time. I think that's where they're going with this, hopefully with her character, because honestly, having the 50s housewife kind of thing was just kind of you can't have that happening. Mufinobi says, ugh, her yelling at the shopkeeper. She didn't yell at him. She basically just told him off. And it seemed kind of nice, actually. I like the way she did it. And actually, I like the actress, too. I honestly can't remember what I've seen her in before. She's been on lots of things. But I like the actress, too. So we have Harding, in the meantime, is playing chess with an old friend of his who happens to be Stephen Williams, by the way. So those of you who don't know who Stephen Williams is, go take a look at a little show that Fox had on the air back in the 80s called 21 Jump Street that had a very little known actor at the time named Johnny Depp in it. And Stephen Williams was their captain. That's where he's from. He's also in a great movie called Better Off Dead. As well. It's got a little small role in that. He's been in tons and tons of things. And he's also an X-Files persona as well. So he's been on X-Files quite a few times. Yes, thank you, Joe Greer. Alpha's been in the High Castle, that's right. And Watchmen. That's right, that's what she's been in. I forgot about that. She was in Man in the High Castle most recently. Yeah. And Rufus as well from Supernatural, a few early seasons. Yeah, exactly. So yes, Mufinobi, Better Off Dead. He's the guy up on the lamppost. He's one of the utility workers. So, let's see where we're at. So he's actually playing chess with an old friend of his when a soldier comes in with a photo of folders of Kehoe and that guy talking from the Man in the Hat. So we know now that the Man in the Hat works for Valentine and Harding at this point. So he is one of their lackeys. And Harding gets up and excuses himself, not before he loses, because he gets beaten in chess by Stephen Williams and leaves. So Quinn and Hynek are walking down the street, down some residential street, again having the argument between having the case closed or finding the truth. And Quinn, of course, is arguing for just closing the damn case out. And Hynek's like, well, don't you want to know what the hell the truth is about this? Yeah. So, and as they're doing this, the co-ed drives up in the car, and says, hey, I've got room for one more if you want to go to homecoming, go with us. And he's like, nope, I've got some business I've got to do. And she tries to find out what it is. He's like, I can't, that's classified, because I can't tell you anything, anything at all. And so she drives off, and he's still kind of pissed about this, saying that, he could be going to this party, of course, and Hynek is out there taking pictures out in the street when people start coming out of their homes and wondering what the hell they're doing and thinking that they're Russians and stuff like this. And they're like, no, we work for the government. We're perfectly fine. And he goes, yeah, this is what happened with the other guys that came too. They were taking pictures just before the lights came, and they've got baseball bats and, all kinds of stuff. And they don't believe from the government. They're from the government at all. And they threaten them. And, Quinn grabs a bat from one of the guys, breaks it over his knee fairly easily, and says, he's about to start some shit at this point when all of a sudden the lights start popping. Yeah, he has broken. That's the first bat that he's broken, Mufinobi. The other one, he actually just grabbed a shotgun from somebody and beat the shit out of them with their own shotgun. Yeah, so he hasn't broken two bats, just the one so far. So lights start popping, people start freaking out, and they're running back into their houses saying, the flying saucers are coming, the flying saucers are coming. So, yeah. Hynek and Quinn, of course, drive out to the field and go wait for the lights. And in the meantime, Mimi is at home alone when she starts hearing someone fiddling with the front door lock. I mean, just like really fiddling with it, not being, discreet at all. And so she gets up, grabs a fire iron, and heads over towards the door, opens it up, and who's there but Susie leaving a little bouquet of flowers. And so she invites Susie in. They're drinking tea and everything. And Susie's apologizing for bringing Mimi over to the beatnik bar, that she thought it might have been too much for her. And, Mimi's explaining that she's the wife of a college professor and how would it look if she was seen there and blah, 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 And we go back to the old 50s, housewife routine thing again. Kind of a little bit boring, but at the same time, we know now that Susie is a Russian agent. And she actually, Mimi talks about her fears. That's the reason why she bought a bomb shelter, was to basically take care of Joel's nightmares, and also just because, her own anxieties that she's having as well. Oh, good night, Penn Farm Girl. Sorry. Yeah, I know. Thank you for hitting the like button now. And so it's just kind of a weird little aside there at this point. So Hynek and Quinn are standing out in the field discussing the billions of stars in the galaxy and wild goose chases. And Quinn is kind of being an asshole at this point. And Hynek's like, yeah, I know. You want to be at the party. He goes, tell you what, how about I drop you at the dorm? And, Quinn agrees. And he goes sit in the car. And Hynek says, I'll be right over there. So Quinn goes and sits behind the driver's seat. And just as he gets inside, the car starts shaking. The electricity in there starts going all nuts, and Quinn grabs onto the steering wheel. He can't do it. It's involuntary. He's just grabbing onto it, and he's telling Hynek not to come near the car. And Hynek actually grabs onto the door handle, gets electrocuted a little bit, and he's going to grab a rock to smash the window. When all of a sudden the lights come flying by overhead. I mean, directly over their head. They both see it at this point. And that's when everything stops in the car and Quinn's able to get out again. So, yeah, it's some really interesting stuff at this point. They both seen evidence of UFOs at this point. And so we have Hynek and Quinn going over to the airport tower to see where, they're talking to the air traffic controller, Tommy, who we saw in the very beginning, and he recorded what direction this thing was flying and what it flew over for how long, all that kind of stuff. And he noted it all down in his logbook. So they're actually tracking it on the map. And they tell him to leave the room, and they start discussing it. And they're like, well, it's not aircraft. It's not birds, of course. We have to, it's not the Russians either. They don't have anything like this. So, yeah, it's what the hell? It's got to be something otherworldly at this point. That's what they're thinking. And in the meantime, Kehoe is walking down the street. He's getting ready to go into his car when he's abducted off the street and brought to a place where these guys put a gun in his mouth and say, you know what, from now on, you're going to write what we tell you to write. And Kehoe's like, you can't do this. I'm a member of the Fourth Movement and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. That's going to get you really far with a gun in your mouth. So, and in the meantime, Mimi and Susie are building the bomb shelter out in the backyard when Mimi sees the guy that was following her in the hardware store. And she tells Susie about it, and they go up to the front to go and see where he's at, and he's disappeared. But he's still actually across the street looking at them through a bush at this point. So Harding is sitting there talking on the phone in his little round room there. And the Secretary General walks in and tells him, what the hell are you doing with Kehoe? You threatened an American citizen. I'm not going to tolerate this shit. He goes, I know what you're doing. And he goes, if you go any further, he goes, I'm going to air all your dirty laundry. Everyone's going to find out about you. And Valentine's in the room as well. And he leaves. And Valentine says, he goes, Harding says, oh, what does he think? He's trying to scare me? And Valentine says, well, I think this will scare you. And that's when he says, Quinn just called and says they have definitive proof of UFO's existence. Yeah. Buswanker? No, not a bushwanker. Oh, it could be a bushwanker. Possibly. So, yeah, so they call in Harding, they call in Quinn and Hynek, and they say, you know what, this is above your pay grade, but we're going to show you what's going on. This is a top secret aircraft called the V-Wing. And this is what we've been testing over there in Texas. And this is what's been, everyone's been seeing. And Hynek's like, well, what about the blackout? And what about what happened to the car with Quinn? He turns to Quinn, and Quinn's like, I don't know what you're talking about, man. You're seeing things kind of stuff. That's what he gives him. And, Harding says to Hynek, are you calling me a liar? And Hynek's like, no, I just want to know, how can this kind of aircraft, and then he just kind of drops it. He's like, forget it. I'm not going to say anything more at this point. And they end up leaving, Harding and Valentine. And Quinn basically tells Hynek, he goes, you know what? For a smart guy, you're the dumbest guy I've ever met. He goes, you need to actually learn when to shut the hell up, kind of thing. Yeah, the V-Wing was a real prototype, movie Finobi. It's kind of what turned into the flying wing way back in I think it was like the late 50s. There was so many different prototypes of crap that was coming out at that point in time. It's hard to keep up with. I know there's websites out there that actually talk about all this stuff. But yeah, it was a real thing that was out there. So Hynek comes home to change locks in a deadbolt as well. And Mimi tells him that's about the guy that was following him. And he asks, is it a guy with a fedora? And she goes, what? No, now you're scaring me. And he goes, no, don't worry about it. He goes, there's nothing to worry about. And in the meantime, as they're discussing this, Joel walks in. Joel's kind of eavesdropping in the kitchen, like mother, like son. And they stop talking. She goes, oh, he's been waiting all day for you to come out there and see this. And so they take him out to the backyard and show him the bomb shelter, aka the shed. And they have some soup out there. And Joel asks about special radiation suits, and Hynek says, I'll see what I can do. Yeah. So Quinn is at home. He's having a drink at his desk. And he starts having like muscle spasms a little bit in his hand. And we start seeing the light. Ooh, sorry about that. Flicker. And it starts flickering the little desk lamp. And he reaches up to tap the bulb and blows it out because he has a little electric discharge. Still a little bit left over from when he was in the car there. So it was a little bit weird. In the meantime, Harding is telling Valentine that Hynek may become a problem later on, and he'll have to handle that. That's what he's worried about. He'll have to handle that at some point in time. In the meantime, Hynek is writing down in his journal everything that he's gone through, and his conclusion of what happened is it's not the V-Wing. That's a possible government cover-up and conspiracy, and that's where we leave it at. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah. So, some good stuff here. We now know definitively that the man in the fedora works for Harding and Valentine. That's for sure. We don't know who this guy is who's following Mimi, who he is, who he works for. And obviously, Susie doesn't know either, because otherwise she would have had that, knowing look on her face. That's what she normally does. And yeah, Filthy. The episode was kind of an average episode. It was a 7.5. I agree. It's about a 7 out of 10. I still liked it. There's some good stuff to it. And speaking of the Flying V, the lights, back in the 80s, I used to live in Northern California near a weapon naval station. And I remember going outside one night to empty out the garbage and looked up. I don't know why. I just happened to look up, saw that exact same thing. It wasn't a V, though. It was a triangle of lights. No noise whatsoever. And fairly low. I would say it was about 300 feet in the air, something like that. And it was at night, of course, so I couldn't make out. I knew it was a triangular shape is what I saw it as. White lights all the way on the outside of it, like spots. And then a red light in the center. No blinking light, just a red light. And then it kind of floated back behind the house and took off. So, yeah, I know. Everyone says screenshot art didn't happen. Yeah, I know. Yeah, movie Finobi. The end, they showed the real photos of everybody. Because, and they also talked about what happened in Lubbock, that they were seeing those lights for like 2 weeks, somewhere around there. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Amazon wasn't around in the 80s there, movie Finobi. So they weren't trying to send my stuff, unless they were trying to send it from the future. But I don't think that was the case. Yeah. There was a lot of weird shit that used to happen out there. And I'm pretty sure that a naval weapons station was the cause of the good majority of it, to tell you the truth, because that was where they were storing a lot of stuff. And at the time, Area 51 was already known, that kind of thing. I'm pretty sure were moving crap out of Area 51 at that point, and they were probably storing it in all different locations. I'm sure that was one of the places they stored it at. It was a huge area that was underground for the most part, and yeah, you couldn't get anywhere near that place without having guns pointed at you. So there you go. All right. So yeah, that was a pretty good episode. If you like what you've seen, hit the subscribe button, or and the thumbs up button as well. Or if you didn't like it, hit the dislike button. If you want to see when I'm going to be on next, take a look at the little bell, hit that bell there. That'll give you notifications of when I'm going to be on next. And tomorrow night is Wednesday night. It's going to be Deadly Class from Sci-Fi episode 2. I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a good one. Thursday night is going to be Gotham. Friday night is going to be Future Man. And Saturday morning is going to be Saturday Morning Blast Off at 10 a.m. It might go a little bit earlier because I've got a car to return as well. So we might be doing that. I don't know. Movie Fanobi says, thanks for sharing your stories. Now we know you've been probed. No, I didn't lose any time on that one. Trust me, I checked that. I checked to make sure I didn't lose any time on that one. I was seeped in UFO lore at that point in time too, when that happened. And yeah, my butt didn't hurt either. So, and I'm not, I know what you're going with that joke. You can just stop that right there. Anyway, if you like what you've seen, hit the subscribe button. You'll see the subscribe button up here. You're going to see some videos over in this section. If you're still not sure about whether or not you should subscribe to me or not, it's going to pick from what you have seen in the past from my video library that kind of matches up with that, with your tastes. Other than that, don't let the door hit your ass on the way out. Otherwise, you may have some asshole professor come in trying to tell you that your theory is wrong and it's a flock of birds with oil that are reflecting light. Again, like I said, an asshole professor. See you later.